Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Journalism Student Town Hall to kind of end off this Journalism in the Time of Crisis conference. So my name is Rachel Morgan. I'm a fourth year journalism student here at Carleton, and since August, I have been acting as Alan Thompson's research assistant for this conference. So when Alan first mentioned to me the idea of this ending sort of student forum, I asked him if I could take it off his hands because I really thought it would be a good idea to have journalism students interacting with each other to discuss the challenges that they see in the world of journalism now and in the future. So I have three co-hosts with me today, so I'm going to get them to introduce themselves shortly. But first, so how this session is going to work, we're just kind of going to go back and forth with any comments or concerns that you have. It could be something that you saw in an earlier panel or just any concern you have being a journalism student during this time or what you see your future is like. So you can feel free if you'd like to speak your questions, you can turn on your mic and just ask the question, or you can use the chat and Callie will be moderating the chat for us. So without further ado, I will introduce my three fellow co-hosts, Callie McTavish, Benit Brach, and Beatriz Silva. So Callie.
Hi guys, thank you so much for making some time to join us today. My name is Callie. As Rachel said, I'm a first year student at BCIT here in Vancouver. And I will kick it over to Bia.
Hi guys, so my name is Bia, how they mentioned. I'm a first year student at U of T and I'm currently in Brazil.
And Benit.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Benit Brach. I'm a fourth year student at Carleton University. I left Abbotsford from BC to go to Carleton. I think it's been a great journey. And currently I'm working with Black Press Media, looking into local news, as well as research with IT World Canada. So yeah.
So the first thing I think we're going to kick off this forum with is discussing how we have transitioned to this whole online learning method for journalism students. So for students like Benit and myself, it has been a great change in our fourth year to all of a sudden have everything online and in a more kind of do-it-yourself method. But for Callie and Bia, they have entered journalism J School in this sort of way. So Benit, would you mind sharing a bit of your experiences with your fourth year online?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite the turning point. You know, we're so used to doing our stories in person. Like that's the whole thing. You got to be in person with the source. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey man, we're on a Zoom interview, right? And it's like trying to tell the same compelling story, but seeing what other mediums can we use. So that's kind of been a big shift. I think, especially when we look at like video production class, how do we portray the stories of these sources in a compelling manner? Also, you know, we're juggling other subjects as well in school. So sometimes it's been, you know, a bit draining trying to be going to classes and figuring out these story ideas. But I think some way or another, we form a routine and we get going with it. So it's been a challenge, but I think it's opened up new avenues for collaboration with other journalists too. So yeah. Big shift.
And Callie or Bia, do you have any perspective on how it's been with your first year of J School online?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, when I initially decided to go back to school for journalism, what I was most looking forward to was building those relationships and the networking opportunities. And that has been a challenge, both with my teachers and with my fellow students, of trying to meet and build those relationships in a COVID safe way. So we're still working out the kinks of that, but I think ultimately we've all shown ourselves to be more resilient than we thought we were capable of being in the pandemic. So that has been the case with this as well.
And what about for you, Bia?
Well, I always thought of university as being more of an experience of meeting people than of knowing content itself. So especially for journalism, in which like you connecting to people is really essential. And as I'm from Brazil, I was expecting to have more connection with the Canadian culture right now when I went to Toronto, but unfortunately, it's not possible now.
So I'm kind of curious, and I would really appreciate some participation in this from our viewers. I am curious to know, so one of my biggest concerns when I was entering my fourth year online was that I was going to be missing out in certain aspects of my education, especially with journalism. I was concerned with like video courses or audio courses that like we wouldn't be able to use equipment. It would be kind of more a do-it-yourself method. Even partner work would be hard because your partner work would be over Zoom. So I might throw it over to Callie first to see how she has seen if online school she thinks has benefited herself in ways that it's actually benefited herself. And then we'll kind of open it up to some participants here.
So, I mean, in terms of the concerns that you mentioned around equipment, at least I can only speak to my experience at BCIT, but they've done an incredible job of making the campus feel very safe. They've set up one-way walking everywhere and lots of hand sanitizing, masks all the time. And then they've set up like cubicles basically so that we're all separated into our own little sneeze pockets when we're in on campus. So we have been able to use equipment. We have been able to do labs on campus, which has been really great. The panel just before this was kind of on the evolution of teaching with COVID-19, and they talked a lot about the flexibility that is needed right now. And obviously it's going to look different at every school, but at least in my experience, I've been really pleased with how the school has adapted to make learning possible for us. I think especially in first year, you need a lot of those hard skills of learning to use the equipment. And so far that's been possible.
Yeah. So then Benit, how have you noticed that being so far removed from your campus?
See, I think part of it has been a good thing in the sense that we have these amazing tools that we have not always learned to use enough of. And I think even in local newsrooms, we've seen these concerns where journalists just don't want to pick up their phones and do these like video captures or, have that convenience of literally in our hands. And so I think this pandemic has really pushed us to say, I can be resilient with simple things that are already at my disposal, right? So I've learned to use my phone more. If it's not my camera, I've learned that I can really reach out to sources wherever, just with the concept of something like video or Skype or Zoom, right? Before, teachers usually say you have to have like they don't prefer video interviews and such online or phone interviews. You got to be in front of the person. But I think we're kind of showing that no, it's possible. Like we're still going to give you the same information, but we're just going to do it in a different means, right? So I think this pandemic's really shown us to be more resourceful with simple things that we have already.
And what about you, Bia? Do you have any perspective on that?
Well, I think that one thing that the pandemic is giving us is the ability to deal with time management and stress management, that I think everyone is struggling with that. At least I am struggling a lot with time management and all of that, especially towards university. And I think that after the pandemic, everyone will be more prepared to deal with that. And also, I think it's making us reflect a lot on mental health and how much that is important. At least like at U of T, they are making available many tools that help us with mental health and anxiety. And I think that's really important.
So then to touch on Bia's points there, first about time management and about mental health, one thing I've noticed a lot this year is when contacting sources, it's like there's less of kind of time frames around there. Like sources are answering me on the weekends. Like I had 3 different sources answer me on Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, and that would never happen before. And so I'm wondering kind of how you guys feel about whether this could be a positive as we're getting more reaction from sources, or a negative as like there's kind of no balance now between where work ends and where your life starts. Anyone can just jump in.
I think, given that statement, Rachel, I think it's important for us to create boundaries when we need them, because if we're losing our concept of time, people are thinking like, oh, I don't know, I feel like I'm working all day, every day. We're going to go crazy, right? Like yesterday, I was in the conference and respite as resilience stood out to me, where, you know, you have to take these breaks, you have to set these boundaries so people are able to understand when you're available with your full potential, with your full capabilities. And that applies to our sources too, because they're people, they're working all the time, if not more or less, depending on what their situation is, right? So I think it's really important to create those boundaries. But in the same sense, it is beneficial if people are able to reach out to us at times that are most convenient to them too. So be on that lookout, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this was an issue before the pandemic, right? Like with the, I mean, rise of is inaccurate because it had risen, but with everybody having a cell phone, everyone was already having a hard time creating that balance because your work email is always on your phone, so or your school email or whatever. But I agree with an attitude shift of sources being, I mean, I don't have that much experience in this, but people seem really willing to respond quickly, get back. And I think I love the respite as resilience line, but you know, as journalists, we put it out there, and if they choose to respond, you know, outside of normal work hours, yeah, definitely beneficial to us. And then hopefully they're putting whatever guidelines on their life that is, you know, going to work for them.
Yeah.
Structure, boundaries, you know.
I agree with that. I think there is like a beneficial part and a not so much beneficial part. It's difficult to separate work and not work, especially when our home is the same place where we work. So, for example, I'm in my bedroom now, and this is the place where I work, but it's also the place that I rest.
Yeah.
So sometimes I have a hard time separating my rest time from my work time.
Yeah.
And that is not really beneficial to our mental health. But at the same time, I think the pandemic has made it easier for us to connect with people. Like we have so many tools that we weren't familiar with before the pandemic. Like Bennett mentioned the cell phone and Zoom and things like that. And I think that will make our connection to people easier in the future.
Yeah.
We're definitely all very familiar with Zoom now.
Yeah. And I think people are using maybe social media more, just being home. So part of what I've done is I've reached out on social networks as well as professional emails. It helps because people's eyes are everywhere, especially now, I think. So one thing I just wanted to add there.
Do we want to put it to the rest of the lovely people who have joined our panel? Do you have any comments about your experience? Do you want to ask the question again, maybe, Rachel?
Sure. Just any experiences with how like time management sort of has benefited or kind of hindered your ability to work as a journalism student during the pandemic?
I'll be honest, I was a mess for a bit of it. Too much going on. I couldn't get my priorities right, one thing after another. And I literally had to sit down with friends and be like, how do I fix this? Because I think it's even as students, you know, we're in school, but these are realities that we face too, that we just can't do it all the time. So I think time management is just one of those things that I think we're still learning. Like I am still telling myself, you've got to go take a walk. You've got to go out, stop working. Sometimes it's just been changing my environment. If I'm not working in my room, I'll go write a story in a cafe because I just can't be in the same place for too long. I don't know how the rest of you have been coping with that.
Yeah, we can't rub it in. We're lucky in Vancouver.
I definitely agree with you. It's really hard, like as Bia said at the beginning, to separate kind of like even your bedroom from your workspace. And like a lot of us like who aren't at home and living in student housing, you know, this is the only space we have. And like if things aren't open, like where do we go to work? That's not the same place that you sleep, right? It makes it very difficult.
No, exactly.
One thing that I'm kind of curious about. So we heard from like obviously a lot of journalists, media professional, public health experts throughout this whole 2-day symposium. But having Bia and Callie here, I like that we have this diverse perspective from first year journalism students to fourth years like Benit and I. I was wondering if Callie or Bia had any almost questions or concerns about like their futures through J School.
I mean, definitely with the lack of networking, I'm more worried about getting a job after this. That was definitely an impetus for wanting to attend this conference. There's also usually a internship portion to my program that didn't happen last year for students because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, we'll see how that changes, but that's definitely a concern. And then also just the way that it's structured. I mean, absolutely teachers are doing their best, but they changed up the way that the curriculum was laid out quite massively. And so my classes are now, normally it would be 9 classes in a semester. Now it's 3 classes a month. And at the end of the month, you're done that. I have some concerns that it's less robust, that because it's condensed to a month, we are doing less assignments. So we have less opportunities to improve and improve that mark and have more things to be marked on to drive that mark up. So yeah, there's definite consequences of doing it now. But I think there's a lot of learning really fast on your feet that's happening that's true to the field of journalism. So I think will be beneficial.
I think that's definitely a good point there, learning on your feet. I remember at Carleton, we had a kind of like a meeting for fourth year students before we started our year. And I remember that I was really concerned about like kind of losing out on my fourth year of J School because like, Carleton makes it like Carleton has this great journalism program and like, we're doing all these things and like we finally get to our fourth year and then it seems like we missed out. But then there's also positives. Like if you look at it, none of us would be working on this conference right now if COVID hadn't happened. And like, that's definitely a big opportunity for networking and in journalism as well.
One thing I think is important to see is that as students, we have a lot of potential to network and lead initiatives in the industry as well. News outlets are, very busy, lots going on all the time. That's just how it is. But I think one thing we started at Carleton was Project J and building a bridge between media outlets and the work that students do, Submit your best work and you could win something, publication opportunities with these industry leaders out there. So I think it's also teaching us like, if it's not clear what's next, maybe we got to do more on our part to help students, help our peers get their stuff out there as well. So thinking of ways to do that, right?
When my friends heard that I was choosing to study journalism, many of them were like, oh, it's a really hard time to study journalism. And I agree, it's really hard right now. It seems like, I don't know, it brings a lot of concerns like, am I going to find a job? It's going to change a lot. But I think that the pandemic has also raised the importance of media to the public. I think that journalism was kind of being discredited for a long time among the public in general. And now, in a time of crisis, people turn to media to get information and all of that. So I think that it also raised the importance of media. So it has the bad side, but it also has the positive side of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also maybe media outlets should look up to us a little bit more and see how can we get these students involved. We're literally on every corner of this country. There's places that news just isn't there. There's deserts. Maybe, we're fresh, we're out of school, give us something to do. I think we need more opportunities from outlets, whether it's, we get like 2 weeks or whatever, but give us an open call for like pitches, ideas on how to help your business models. I think COVID especially is a time of transformation. We're learning a lot about the work we do as journalists, but news outlets are learning about how do they change their models so that we're growing and that we're continuing to, work and be successful. So yeah.
So then I'm curious to know, like, because obviously, COVID is affecting journalism, but each of us kind of have this path that we want to take. So I'm curious to know from the three of you or anyone in the audience, kind of what you see your path in journalism, like what's your ultimate goal, whether that's like a beat you want to follow or like a medium, and then how you kind of see that impacted specifically.
Who wants to go?
Tough question. I hope to go into podcasting after journalism, and so I think that podcasting, or I know that podcasting has actually grown a lot during the pandemic, that it is something that people have time for and that they've cherished as a way to get news, as a way to learn about the things that they want to learn about. So I'm pretty hopeful about that it will continue to be a valued form of media. But yeah, there's some pretty concerning things that came up over the last couple of days of like the number of smaller organizations that have shut down, and those are training grounds for us. Those are where you cut your teeth and you get your first job, and so that's definitely worrisome.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I guess the ultimate goal was always broadcasting journalism, which I'd like to go towards. But I feel myself I'm a bit like divided right now. Maybe students can relate to this, is that I've been trained to be a journalist through Carleton, through school, but work has been marketing and promotions and campaigning with different projects. So I'm kind of like this persona of mixing journalism with marketing, and is that okay? Like, is that okay to be somebody who wants to do both? I don't know. Maybe we have to revisit what the definition of a journalist is, or is it just because over time we're learning new traits and abilities in multimedia that maybe we can learn to do a bit of both? I don't know. But I think overall, I think as students now, we can be hopeful because we have so much capacity to do crazy, amazing things that traditional outlets maybe haven't seen yet, right? What can we pitch that's different forms, different mediums? So I'm hopeful about that. I'm excited about that. I think when we come into this industry saying, no, listen, like I got this idea too. As students, we know some stuff too, that it's fun and it's engaging for both sides as well. So yeah.
For me, I'm really into writing and reading, and that was what made me choose journalism. In the beginning, like when I first chose it, my goal was to work on editing. But now, especially with COVID, I noticed how people that are part of the community need help getting information and interpreting information. And I really want to use my privilege of having a medium through which I can talk to people to help them gain information. So maybe working with critical journalism or local journalism would be something that I would look forward to.
And I think going off of Benit's question too, or not question, but response as well. I remember a prof told me once that like, as a journalist, your job might not exist yet. Like you may be the one creating your own job. So like, maybe Benit will like go off in her journalism marketing direction and she'll end up being something that no one's really done before.
I'm so confused, to be honest. Like, I don't know what to tell people. Like, I can be objective, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say, Rachel. I think it's an opportunity. Like, there's just too much. Podcasting, as Kelly mentioned, so many different mediums, so much we can do. I don't know. I think it's exciting.
I mean, I heard on one of the panels, how at some news organization, they accept and encourage their journalists to take video on their phones. And they're just like, that's the world we live in nowadays. It's not as perfect as like set up whatever, but there's value in that too, and we need to be more in the moment and faster. So like more open to all different kinds of media.
Yeah, that's fair. And also something that really stood out to me with this conference is sustainability. And what are we going to think about going forward to keep our industry going, right? So part of it is thinking about the revenue side. Like as students, we don't really touch on that in school. I don't know if everybody can speak to that, but making money for organizations, I think, is very important, that I would love to know more about, because that's what keeps the cycle turning too, right? Like revenue side to it. So we spoke about different models of like newsletter based or readership subscriptions are the only way to go now. But what do we do about local news, right? So do we as students in university, do we have some incentive to know about these things? Can we help in a way of pushing towards this? I don't know. I think that's also something that's very important that I think we should be taught more about.
We just have a question in the chat here. An open question to everyone attending. To begin every year, I try to make myself a list of things I want to learn in my year at uni. This year, my list was filled with online networking goals and building my online multimedia portfolio. These are changes from previous years due to the virus. How have your learning goals conformed to the online learning environment? Do you want to start, Rachel?
That's a loaded question. Honestly, so my year in journalism like really started out really rough. Like as Callie said, her school dropped their internships last year, and I lost this summer an internship at Canadian Geographic. That was like, it was like my dream. It was my dream, and I lost it because of the pandemic. And so like one thing that I've really been working towards this year is like getting like my name out there and like creating those network connections. And I feel like that's something that actually might be easier to do online than in person. So like this summer I worked on creating myself just a whole blog to post all of my journalism work I've done for school on so far. Just like, no one might look at it yet. No one might ever look at it, but like it's there. And so it's something that I can put my name to.
Yeah, I'm lucky in my program that part of the program is that we create a website. So we're working on that right now. But it's definitely a big priority for me that website be aesthetically pleasing, and then also like easy to navigate and SEO friendly. And that is my resume now is going to be my website. And that's the future for all of us. The online is a big equalizer that we can choose how we present ourselves in this really modern way. So that's definitely a goal of mine for this year. And then also reaching out to, so at the beginning of our year, my program is only 50 people. So that makes the networking a little bit easier, more approachable. So we created a WhatsApp group with everyone in our class right from the first week. And then we talk to each other all of the time, and we have different like study groups that have broken off from that, and you can always reach out to anybody from that. I'm happy to put my contact info in the chat here as well if people want to get in touch with me later, and if you guys want to do that, we can do that as well. But kind of, I think we're lucky to be a generation that's more comfortable with getting to know people in an online forum and to just not being afraid to do that.
To be honest, I'm like, I don't know much of technology. Like, I don't know how to do technology that much. And I had an opportunity to take an elective on like digital art when I was in high school, but I was just like, oh no, I know nothing about it. I don't want to do it. I would just like go the old school way. And now I'm seeing the importance of knowing at least the basics of technology. So I think that is one of my goals that changed now with COVID.
Yeah. For me, this summer was, I literally said I want to do some investigative, some work, something that I can investigate something. So I think I just give myself themes throughout different months of like, here's what I want to do within the next 3 months. Just one theme, guys. That's all you got to do. And you can push yourself to do that one way or another. Currently, right now, I think my interest is more in data. COVID-19 especially has shown us the importance of numbers, and helping people understand what those numbers mean. So I'm taking a data journalism course, and for a bit I was like, I have no idea what's happening. All this like coding and stuff, I don't know, but we're learning slowly. And I think part of that is remembering that even if you step outside of J school, there are skills that you can continue to learn. So one of our panelists yesterday spoke about his data experience. Like he learned all this Python and all this crazy, softwares and all that. And it just shows us that maybe sometimes we got to push ourselves to invest our own time into these little things, even if it's learning new programs or if it's learning different communities online that you can further explore. So I started looking more into LinkedIn groups. A lot of people, experts are in there, Reddits and subreddits, a lot of people congregate on these other mediums. And that's kind of what I focused on as well in the online environment.
If you feel comfortable, Manuel, do you mind me asking you to turn on your mic and tell us how your virtual networking is going?
Actually, hello. Hello. Almost identical to what everyone's been saying. A very big shift to try to build an online presence that I wanted to represent and be. So I worked on a website. I tried to figure out if Twitter was still the place to actively be as a journalist, or if maybe other social media platforms were now the place to be. And I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, so that's kind of the big thing. And then it was mentioned like just trying to network in a small classroom or 50 students or whatever, trying to keep in contact by making group chats and stuff. That's also very big in our grade. In second year here at Carleton, we have group chats, and yeah, that's kind of where we communicate. We try to build some form of relationship that way during classes, because it is quite difficult. In Zoom, for example, you only see a certain number of people at the screen, or you do, like, even if you do turn on the full group participants thing, you don't see everyone, and it does make it difficult. So
yeah, I see Yasmin and Hassan and Janice. Do any of you guys want to give us a perspective on your experience? Have your goals changed this year as being an online student?
I think.
Yeah, that's okay.
I can throw in like more mental health and wellness checks with yourself too. That's so important, because I've been drained to the point of like, I can't do this anymore. I'm working all day on the screen, and then I have school on top of that, and you just feel like you're done, So really important, and I'm still learning. And I think as students, we are too, of taking that time aside. The little things really are important for our online environment and to be productive on it too.
So,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Did someone?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I am just curious. So the whole point of this student town hall was kind of to get a sense of where people's struggles, confusions, problems, questions, concerns, advice is lying. And after this conference, I kind of want to keep this conversation going and create some sort of forum where people can, put in their comments, put in their concerns. And I feel like a lot of people are just confused right now. And so I'm kind of just wondering what your biggest problem is that you've run into so far this year.
Problems.
It's definitely not getting to be like in the classroom with people. I feel like journalism the reason I wanted to get into it was because I wanted to interact with people in person, and I had a career in sales for 5 years before I did this. So, came to journalism but a little bit later. And frankly, I found there to be a huge difference having meetings with customers in person versus over the phone versus Zoom meetings. Like, I think that it's great that we can be more flexible. It adds some, it is really good that we have Zoom, especially where you can see faces, but it always struck me when you're actually in a room with somebody in front of them, the stuff that they share with you that I don't think comes up as naturally when you're not really standing in front of that person. So yeah, that's definitely been a challenge.
You know how,
Sorry to interrupt
or at
you.
least in my first year class, I remember learning that you can learn so much from walking into a room with someone before you even start the interview, just the environment and stuff. And that's just not a thing right now, at least not in the same way. And so, I mean, I guess you can kind of, if you're lucky and the person turns on their video camera on a Zoom meeting, you're lucky enough to somehow get some insight, but it's so much more difficult. And I guess you have to adapt by asking new questions that you would otherwise have maybe not have asked. And I think, at least for me, I guess I feel kind of lucky in that sense, because now I know what these questions, like in a professional big environment where, let's say I'm representing a really big, whatever it is. I now kind of know what questions I could ask in these situations where I can't walk into a room and just, see all the stuff around me and add it to the story.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that accessibility to our profs is also very important. So I'm taking a 4th year sports class, and I had the professor that I have right now in 2nd year, but I had hoped to develop more of a relationship with him because he kind of did the same thing that I want to do. And that's a lot harder over the internet.
Definitely.
Can anyone speak to what their teachers have done to mitigate that, like acknowledge that relationship building is harder, and anything that they've done to change that?
I know, and I'm not really sure if this is something that Carleton always does or if it's new this year or easier this year because people can join from wherever they are, but in our specialized journalism classes, so like we have for different beats. So right now I'm taking health and science reporting, and pretty much every week my prof, Sarah Everts, has a different guest speaker of like either, a public policy maker or like last week, sorry, we had an Indigenous midwife or like a health journalist on. And so like that has really advanced connections, even though you're not virtual connections, right? So
one thing that my media studies professor is doing that I think it's really nice to connect is that she's doing personal office hours. So instead of going to a room with 100 people asking questions, you have a one-on-one meeting with the professor. And I think that is a really nice opportunity for you to connect with them.
Yeah,
Do you have to
I
book
agree
in the
with that as
time?
well.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't know if it's because I'm in 4th year, so like I'm, pretty experienced at this by now, or if it's because it's online, but I feel like this year it's been a lot easier actually to get in contact with your profs, make connections with your profs. I've had one-on-one meetings with pretty much all my profs now, and like whereas like in previous years I might have just been like, I'm not going to go to their office hours, I'm just going to email them. But now you email them and they're like, oh, okay, let's set up a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I feel like that's actually been different this year.
And to the profs out there, it is really helpful when you take that like 20 minutes or that 30 minutes just to talk to us, because students are feeling uncertain about so many things, right? Like I had to work on some paper and I needed the prof just to talk me through something. And I think when we're able to be getting your time, it goes a long way. It really does. So yeah.
Yeah, a number of the panelists. Pardon,
Sorry,
say
sorry,
again.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, okay. Screen sharing is great. When profs turn on screen sharing to actually show us what they're seeing, like it's really helpful, at least in my opinion.
Especially in data class, when they're showing the little tiny like code references, that's been a huge help. And recording the lectures and putting them on YouTube later on or something. That way we're able to go back, helps out.
Yeah, definitely. A number of the panelists mentioned how they felt like their students were higher anxiety than they had ever been and were needing more assurance. And it felt really good to me as a student to hear those teachers say, and I'm here for it. If they need to talk that essay through, if they need like students coming and saying, am I doing this right? And then giving them the feedback. I think maybe in the past that might have been called hand-holding, and I appreciate that the teachers are empathic towards that.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing last night when I was watching the opening night forum, I heard Andre Picard say that his newsroom, like most mornings, they'd go in and they'd have their little huddle in the morning and be like, hey, 5 minutes, quick, give me all your stories. And now it's like, okay, how you doing this morning? And I feel like I've definitely felt that from my profs as well, like, because like no one has really ever known what's going on in your outside life, but everybody knows that COVID has made your life that much harder. And it's been like that for everyone. So like everyone is, even though we're all on our own in this, like everyone is kind of feeling that they're being pushed down by this. And so I feel like profs are taking that into consideration, definitely, or at least I've noticed here at Carleton.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to celebrate your small victories, right? Like after getting that assignment in, no matter what you did to get it done, you got it done. I mean, with newsrooms, like those days where you're getting up for those same day stories, you get so nervous. And the moment that you're finished, everybody's celebrating together, by where Rachel's sitting, literally. But I think it's also important to make sure that you celebrate your little victories, whether it's whatever assignment you finish, how you finish it, because when people say it's unprecedented, it really is. So we're like innovating as we're going, and that's good. So be mindful of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So before I pass it over to Alan, I actually have one question for Alan. So for students like Benit and I who are graduating this year, how do you see kind of the media environment changing in terms of us being able to access jobs, and how might that change in 3 years by the time Bia and Callie are heading out into the world?
Future talk.
It's really hard to predict, and I don't know if Janice is still on the call from Ryerson. It's interesting talking to some newsroom managers. They're kind of encouraging in the sense that they think the skill set that you are now forced to add by working remotely, working on your own, having to use 4 different platforms and pieces of technology to do your work, they like that. They like what they see. They like the downside of that could be, they like the idea of also being able to maybe make their newsroom smaller, have more people work remotely, have more people work on their own. I think it's going to be a real transition period for everyone. And I should go back and look at the report that Julie Pozzetti released this morning. I mean, really sobering picture about what's happening in the media and happening with news organizations. But this may also accelerate a shift that was already taking place. Tom Rosensteel was talking about it last night, that print media simply must go digital, subscription-based, almost immediately. That, have a newspaper on the weekend for old time's sake, but make that transition. And with a lot of things, maybe this crisis has kind of forced people to think more innovatively and to make some changes that might not otherwise have come about without a crisis. We were already in a crisis. So when you add a crisis onto a crisis, maybe it does compound the need to make a change.
Yeah. And I think it's also important for us as students to think like that, think innovatively, think about what solutions we're going to bring to the table, aside from covering story by story by story, right? We fall into routines of this is next, but we got to look more into the bigger picture too. So yeah, this is showing that.
Right, so I think I'll hand it over to Alan now to just kind of close us off here.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everybody for being on the call. I know it's now like very dark outside here in Ottawa, and when this started yesterday morning, it was kind of dark too in the morning when we began this 2-day. It seems like a week ago. Hence my wife calls them Samsonite eyes, like the bags under my eyes. But this has been a great couple of days, and I'm glad that some of you were able to be part of it. I really wanted this symposium to end with a discussion not just about journalism education. We kind of had that discussion in the second last panel, but for this to end with a discussion among journalism students. And Rachel made a really good suggestion, and I'll be glad to help with this. I think we need to figure out of all the platforms out there, Discord, Facebook, like whatever platform you decide might be a good place for people to continue to congregate, to have this discussion about journalism education and what it means, you know, in the pandemic as it continues, and what it is going to mean post-pandemic. I think we still have to think about those two things, because we are not out of the pandemic yet, and we may well be in this environment for some time. So I think we'll just have to continue to adapt and figure out what that means. But as I've kept saying about this conference, we're trying to draw out of this the lessons that we can learn post-pandemic for journalism. And one of the conferences, somebody said something really interesting. She said, a crisis, it'd be horrible if a crisis like this was wasted. That there could be opportunity that we can look for and that we can find. And maybe that's just the best possible way to try and put a positive spin on this, that we will find the ways to seek out the opportunity and to adapt. So I'm conscious of the time, and that everybody's been hanging in there and working really hard. And I've got a great team of 14 journalism students at Carleton who are going to continue to work. They've been documenting this event right from beginning to end. So it's been a really great exercise. And I want to thank all of you. And this will be kind of the official closing. I don't want to drop my mic because my blue Yeti would smash on the floor if I did that. But I want to thank everyone who was involved. I sort of have an obligation to thank SSHRC, the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council, that's funded this. We partnered with a number of organizations, the Center for I can't even talk anymore. The Center for International Governance Innovation, CG, in Waterloo, the American Press Institute in Washington, CPAC in Canada, all made financial contributions to this event and helped enormously in pulling it together. The Canadian Association of Journalists, the Center for International Media Assistance. You'll see their presence throughout the conference if you go back and look at some of the sessions online. So it was terrific to have good partners and a lot of support from Carleton. I want to thank Rachel for the work she's been doing for the last few months on this. My colleagues at Carleton, Aniron Bosley, Randy Boswell, Sarah Everts, Brett Popplewell, we're all partners on the project, formal partners on the project. Scott Mitchell, also a PhD candidate. Randy Bowler, Dave Elliott, we're working with Rachel on the tech side recording. I really have to thank, and I'm not sure if she's still on the call, but Anne Blaney from CG has just been an enormous help in making all this happen, pulling it all together using this new platform, Socio, that we adopted. And Hannah Rivkin and the student multimedia team, again, have done a really terrific job. So it's been a great event, and I want to thank you, and I'm glad that we were able to end in the right place, and that is with a group of journalism students. So thank you very much, everyone, and whoever is in charge of the off switch, I think you can flick it now.